Ethan Harper stared at his phone, the screen illuminating his quiet room in muted blue. The message was simple: Ethan, I'd like you to come over this weekend. Just you and me. Mason. He read it twice, then a third time, hoping he had misinterpreted the tone. It wasn't unusual for his Uncle Mason to invite him over. Mason had always been warm, charming in that understated way, but there was something in the phrasing that made Ethan hesitate. Just me and him, he muttered under his breath. That detail lingered like a question mark that refused to fade. Ethan ran a hand through his hair and leaned back against the wall. Mason had always been a presence in his life, but lately, the uncle he admired from afar had taken on a different significance. There was curiosity in Ethan that he didn't entirely understand, an emotional pull he couldn't neatly define. Maybe it was the way Mason listened, really listened, when he spoke. Maybe it was the quiet confidence that seemed to radiate from him without effort. Ethan didn't know, and that uncertainty both excited and unnerved him. By Friday morning, Ethan had made up his mind. He packed lightly, unsure of what to expect, and caught a train toward Mason's neighborhood. The city blurred past the window as his thoughts oscillated between anticipation and apprehension. Memories of previous visits filled his mind, Mason showing him old photographs, teaching him a trick with chess pieces, or just talking about life's oddities late into the evening. This weekend promised more than nostalgia, though. He could feel it in the tight pull in his chest and the nervous tapping of his fingers. When Ethan arrived, Mason was waiting on the porch, as if he had been expecting him all along. The sunlight caught in Mason's hair, and for a moment, Ethan's pulse quickened. "Ethan," Mason said, his voice calm, even, but with an undertone that suggested more than simple hospitality. "Come in. I'm glad you could make it." The house was familiar yet somehow different. The living room smelled faintly of cedar and old books, the furniture arranged in the same way Ethan remembered, yet the air seemed heavier, charged with an unspoken tension. Mason led him to the kitchen, where the faint aroma of fresh coffee mingled with the crisp scent of autumn wind drifting through open windows. "Sit," Mason said, gesturing to a chair near the table. "We have a lot to catch up on." They talked at first about ordinary things, Ethan's studies, Mason's work, but the conversation slowly took on a deeper, more personal tone. Mason spoke candidly about the struggles in his life, the quiet loneliness that seemed to shadow him despite his outward composure. Ethan listened, rapt, feeling a strange mix of concern and admiration. It wasn't just sympathy he felt, there was something more, something he couldn't quite articulate. At one point, Mason paused, looking out the window at the backyard bathed in golden afternoon light. "You know, Ethan," he said softly, "sometimes I wonder if we really see the people closest to us. Even family. We get so wrapped up in our routines, in expectations, we forget to notice the small truths." Ethan nodded, unsure what to say. He felt as if Mason was speaking directly to him, not just about general life advice but about something private, something intimate. The words carried weight. They lingered, wrapping around him like the edges of a puzzle he hadn't yet realized he needed to solve. Dinner came and went, simple fare, but every glance, every brush of Mason's hand against his arm when reaching for the water pitcher seemed magnified in Ethan's mind. He tried to shake the feeling, to rationalize it. Uncle Mason was family. He was simply being friendly, perhaps a little overly attentive. That had to be it. Later, as evening fell and the sky darkened into deep indigo, Mason suggested they take a walk through the garden. The crisp air carried the scent of fallen leaves, and the quiet rustle beneath their feet seemed to echo the tension neither wanted to name. Mason spoke less, allowing silence to stretch comfortably between them, yet the weight of unspoken words was palpable. At the edge of the garden, Mason stopped and turned to Ethan. "I'm glad you came," he said simply. There was a softness in his gaze that made Ethan's stomach twist, a combination of warmth, reassurance, and something else entirely, a spark he hadn't anticipated. Ethan forced a smile, nodding, but inside, a storm of conflicting emotions raged. Guilt mingled with intrigue, admiration tangled with confusion. He had never felt this way about anyone, certainly not a family member, and yet Mason's presence drew him in, effortlessly, irresistibly. By the time they returned to the house, Ethan felt lightheaded, as if the world had subtly shifted. Mason offered him a drink, a casual gesture, but the way he looked at Ethan, steady, patient, almost expectant, made Ethan's heart pound. He realized that this weekend might not be just a casual visit. Something had changed. Something had begun. As Ethan lay in the guest room that night, listening to the faint hum of the city beyond the windows, he reflected on the day. He thought about Mason's words, the quiet intensity in his eyes, the way the ordinary had felt extraordinary simply because Mason had been a part of it. There was a pull he couldn't resist, a question he couldn't answer, and then, just before sleep claimed him, Ethan understood the truth: nothing about this weekend would be ordinary. Something had shifted, subtly but irrevocably. He didn't know what lay ahead, and the uncertainty both thrilled and terrified him. With that realization, his eyelids finally closed, but the tension lingered, like the first tremor before an earthquake. The weekend had just begun, and everything, Ethan knew, was about to change. Ethan Harper spent the day circling the edges of his thoughts like a bird hesitating over an unfamiliar territory. Every glance at Logan's phone on the counter, every laughter that didn't quite reach Logan's eyes, tightened the knot of suspicion in his chest. He told himself repeatedly that he was overthinking, that dreams and shadows had no claim on reality, yet the unease refused to loosen its grip. By mid-afternoon, Logan had left for work, offering a quick kiss on Ethan's cheek and a promise to be home early. Ethan nodded mechanically, watching him go, and once the door clicked shut, he allowed himself a moment of quiet panic. The apartment felt emptier than it ever had, each sound, the creak of the radiator, the hum of the refrigerator, magnified in the absence of Logan's presence. He sat on the couch, cradling a mug of coffee long gone cold, and tried to piece together the fragments of memory from the night before. He replayed Logan's movements in his mind, the way he had crept into the bedroom, careful not to wake him, and how Ethan had sensed a subtle energy in the room, a shift that felt foreign and wrong. Ethan hadn't confronted him, he hadn't even fully acknowledged it to himself, but now, in the stark light of day, he couldn't escape the feeling that something had violated the trust between them. Ethan's thoughts wandered to the texts he'd noticed earlier that morning, the messages that felt distant and detached. He scrolled through them again, careful not to overanalyze, but each word seemed to carry hidden weight. A casual, "see you later," or "don't forget the meeting," felt like a mask, a veneer over something more significant. The doubt clawed at him with increasing insistence, demanding answers that he wasn't sure he wanted to hear. By the time Logan returned, the apartment was steeped in tension. Ethan pretended to be absorbed in a book, though his eyes betrayed him, flicking toward Logan every few seconds. When Logan stepped inside, the usual ease of his posture felt rehearsed, almost defensive. "Hey," he said, smiling, but the corners of his mouth didn't quite reach his eyes. "Long day." Ethan set the book aside and forced a small smile. "Yeah, yours?" His voice was calm, though internally his thoughts raced. "Same old," Logan replied, dropping his bag by the door. He moved through the apartment with a fluid motion, but there was an energy beneath it, a subtle tension, a tightness that Ethan had never noticed before. It wasn't overt, not yet, but Ethan felt it, a quiet warning that something had shifted. They ate dinner in relative silence, the clatter of cutlery filling spaces where conversation normally flowed freely. Ethan wanted to speak, to ask, to demand the truth about the night before, but fear held him back. He feared confrontation, feared Logan's reaction, feared that whatever he uncovered might shatter the life they had built. And yet, he couldn't ignore it, the weight of unspoken suspicion pressed against his chest with every bite. after clearing the dishes, Ethan lingered in the living room while Logan retreated to the bedroom. The door closed softly behind him, leaving Ethan with the quiet pulse of the apartment. He felt a surge of frustration and helplessness. How could someone he loved, someone he trusted so completely, harbor secrets that threatened the very foundation of their relationship? His mind swirled with possibilities, each one more painful than the last, and he realized he needed clarity, even if it hurt that he decided to confront Logan, not in anger, but in pursuit of truth. He knocked lightly on the bedroom door, hearing Logan's casual, "Come in response. Ethan stepped inside, the air between them charged with unspoken tension. He fixed his gaze on Logan, who was adjusting his shirt, pretending calm, pretending ease. "Logan," Ethan began, voice steady though his heart raced. I need to ask you something. Last night, did something happen while I was asleep?" Logan froze briefly, eyes flicking toward Ethan with a flash of something, nervousness, maybe guilt, maybe just surprise. "What do you mean?" he asked, keeping his tone light, casual, as though the question were absurd. Ethan swallowed hard, trying to keep his composure. "I don't know exactly. I felt something different. And I can't ignore it." He searched Logan's face, looking for any hint of truth, any crack in the armor. For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy and suffocating. Logan's charm, which had always been a shield, now seemed almost fragile under Ethan's gaze. He finally spoke, voice quieter, more measured. "Ethan, nothing happened. You're imagining things. Maybe the dream got to you." But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling. Something about Logan's words, the hesitation beneath them, the subtle avoidance in his gaze, made his doubt bloom into a quiet certainty. He wanted to believe Logan, to cling to the love they shared, but the instinct inside him, a mix of fear, intuition, and heartbreak, refused to be silenced. Ethan's chest tightened. I don't know if I am imagining things. I just know that something feels off. I can't pretend it's okay." His voice was raw, the vulnerability he usually hid laid bare. Logan looked at him, eyes softened, voice calm but carrying a subtle edge of defensiveness. "Ethan, I didn't mean to hurt you. You're reading too much into it. You know I love you." Ethan's mind whirled. Love. Trust. Betrayal. All tangled together in a mess he wasn't ready to sort out. He felt the weight of the question he hadn't asked yet: what had Logan done? And more importantly, what would it mean for them if the truth came out? He realized, in that moment, that the life he had taken for granted, the certainty of their relationship, was fragile. And fragile things, no matter how beautiful, could shatter without warning. Ethan stepped back, letting the words hang in the air between them. Logan's gaze followed him, unreadable, leaving Ethan suspended in uncertainty. He didn't know what the next moment would bring, whether confrontation would lead to clarity or devastation, and yet, despite the fear, the doubt, and the tension pressing in from all sides, Ethan felt a flicker of resolve. He couldn't ignore it. He couldn't pretend everything was fine. The truth, however painful, demanded acknowledgement. As Logan's figure receded toward the bedroom window, bathed in the soft glow of the evening sun, Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, hands clenched around the edge of the blanket. He knew that the night's revelations, whatever they might be, were only the beginning. Something had shifted between them, a subtle but undeniable fracture, and Ethan Harper understood that their story would never be the same again. The apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like the stage for a reckoning. And as the shadows lengthened, stretching across the walls, Ethan braced himself. The questions, the fears, the suspicions, they were all there, waiting for the truth to surface, and though he didn't know what that truth would look like, he knew one thing for certain: he couldn't turn away.